All right, I think it's about time to start class here. Let me go settings. Uh, Display. All right. Just leave it on there. Okay, so we're going to talk about Genesis 42, 43, 44. 42, 43, 44. Any particular questions on those three chapters? You don't know?
No, we know everything.
We do know a fair amount about these chapters. That's why I want to make sure I cover whatever questions you may have. Nobody has any particular question? All righty. Well then, let me ask you, why do we have these chapters? I don't know if you've read it, but you'll notice that there's a fair amount of repetitiveness going on. You have Moses recording the account, and then invariably you have one of the sons telling somebody else what took place. So almost everything is described twice in this whole section here. So why do we have this section? I would have thought, given the average age of this group, we'd have got over our shyness from high school, grade school, preschool. Oh, yes, sir.
I just think it's important for the development, for them to become a nation,
Okay.
because they had to be separated and even hated to be by themselves.
Yeah, but so in chapter 42, what do we have takes place in 42?
Fulfillment of Joseph's dream.
Well, we do have one verse noting that he remembers his dream. That's not the way I quite would do it here. Okay, so we got brothers going to Egypt here. To Egypt. And I'm going to go ahead and have Miss Julie read to us. You said I could always call on you, so I'm going to call on you. I'm happy to read, but you said you were happy to read, so I'm happy to let you be happy. You did. So why don't you go ahead and just read the whole chapter for us? 42? Yeah, all 42, so 38 verses. Oh, yes, sir? Oh, yes, yes, sir.
Not need the microphone.
You do. You're a very quiet, demure lady.
Oh, I don't want the microphone on.
Okay.
No.
It's for the people online.
Sort of like the Snyders in my mom.
Yeah. So
No.
just put it somewhere. There you go.
You're so awful. Hi, everybody online. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. No, he said to them, you have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. Joseph said to them, it is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back to your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us. Reuben replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other, trembling, and said, what is this that God has done to us? When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, the man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. Then the man who is Lord over the land said to us, this is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the many pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. But Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow.
So we know how the story ends. We know that Joseph says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So why do we have to have this big, long charade? That's a question for you to answer.
Because they were such honest men.
Okay. So they do talk a lot about honesty. Cassie?
Because in previous story with Joseph, when he was sold into slavery, they came back and told their dad a different story. So then you see the original story, and you see that they actually go back and tell the true story
Okay, so we do see that they're telling a more consistent story here. You do want to see the hand of God in as much as Joseph encountered the 10 brothers. You do want to realize that in Egypt, body hair was always removed. It was not a desirable characteristic. And so Egyptian men and women shaved things, and they shaved their bodies as well. So Joseph would have looked vastly different than they would have remembered him at all. You also want to realize that Canaanites would have been very full beard. They would have had plain clothing, and they looked very much like dirty shepherds. Egyptians did not like sheep, did not like goats, did not like shepherds. You'll see later on, they don't want to eat around the Canaanites, so they just saw things vastly different than the Egyptians did. And so when the Canaanites came and saw Joseph, they just saw a ruler, and they didn't see somebody who could have potentially been their brother because, as far as I know, their brother's dead. So you want to see the hand of God in that. And when Joseph sees them bowing down, that's when he remembers the dream. He's like, oh, I'm making this connection here. So why doesn't Joseph just say who I am? Why does he go through this elaborate charade of saying, I don't believe you guys? Yes, sir. It was a fulfillment of prophecy. Explain further. Well, they bowed down to Joseph at the start, so that would have fulfilled that dream here. But there wasn't anything in the dream about, I don't believe you guys. You need to all stay here. You need to get me your other brother. I'm going to send one of you back. I'm going to send everybody but one back. Nothing about that. So why do that?
See if their hearts really change.
Oh, very good. Have you considered how Jacob felt when he got back and he saw the brothers coming in? What he knows is that he sent his sons off, whom it seems like are just being bums. It's hard for me not to read a negative thing into here when he says in verse 1, why are you staring at one another? You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, you guys got things to do. You should be doing things. What are you standing around doing nothing while we're all starving to death? Do something. So his dad's getting upset with them because they're not doing what they need to do. So he sends them off. He sends them off with money, go get some food. They come back, and lo and behold, they're one brother short. That brings all a flashback to Joseph. And on top of that, they have all this extra money. So it definitely looks like they sold a brother and they made a profit. Even though they're saying, hey, no, the Egyptians, they just put the money back. They didn't take our money for the grain. I know it sounds strange, Dad, but we didn't sell our brother again. So you can see that Jacob doesn't really trust his sons as much as they might have thought. And Joseph needs to see whether they really have changed. Because ultimately, Joseph wants to know what's going to go on in the next chapter, because he wants to know about his brother. He wants to know about Benjamin, because that's the brother from Rachel. So if the brothers destroyed Joseph, wanted to kill him, and eventually got talked down to sell him into slavery, well, what happened to Benjamin? Surely something bad happened to him. Because, again, how is Joseph to take it? Because Benjamin would have been in his 30s, most likely, that 10 of the 11 brothers come down to get some food. And the youngest one doesn't make it. It sure looks like, to Joseph's eyes, that something bad has happened to Benjamin. And so Joseph wants to know whether his brother was mistreated like he was mistreated, which is why he says what he does. He wants to know whether Benjamin has anything bad happen to him, because, of course, the guys say they're honest, and, well, Joseph knows personal experience that honesty only goes so far. I want you to notice that he is going to originally keep all of them but one, and then he changes that because they have an interpreter in there. So again, another indication that they don't recognize Joseph, because Joseph is speaking Egyptian through an interpreter who's translated it to Hebrew for the 10 brothers. And when the 10 brothers are talking, well, that's when Joseph finally finds out about Reuben trying to defend him. So Joseph says, we're going to take Simeon. He's the next born in line. And you're going to leave him here for prison and go back. So they go back. The dad doesn't have a good vibe about this at all. And then what do you think about Reuben's promise to his father in verses 37, 38? Mary doesn't like his promise. Why not? Yeah. It does show something that a grandfather, I lost my son, now I've lost a second son, and then one of my sons says, hey, you can have 2 of your grandsons. I'll kill them if I don't bring back your second son. I mean, it's obviously just a win-win situation for the grandfather here, you know. And here it looks like Reuben is offering all his sons, but we know from later on that Reuben had 4 children, 4 sons. And so he's only offering 50% of his sons as a guarantee, but of course he's offering a guarantee to make up for Joseph and potentially Benjamin. So Jacob just doesn't like that at all, doesn't appreciate it, doesn't have anything good to say about it here. Joseph wants to know if anybody really has changed. And that's what this is about. Has anybody really changed? We sometimes think about these 2 words. Forgiveness and reconciliation. And we think about them being really close to the same thing, close to the same ideas. And in no doubt, in some senses, you can make that. But reconciliation always has the idea of restoring trust. You can forgive somebody, meaning you're not going to hold it against them that they wrecked your car when they borrowed it from you, or they broke your lawnmower. You can forgive them and not mistreat them any further in the future, but that doesn't mean you've been reconciled to them. It doesn't mean you're still going to trust them with your car again. You know, reconciliation has that added element of trust here. So with the development of the nation here, these 12 brothers, we're going to see some forgiveness, but we need to see this reconciliation. And the only way we're going to have this restored trust is if these guys really are honest and their hearts really have changed. And we're only going to see that when we see how they treat Benjamin. So look at the next chapter. It says in verse 43, now the famine was severe in the land, so it came out when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back and buy us a little food. How long do you think is taking place in that verse right there? Time-wise. How much time? What was that?
Less than 7 years.
Definitely less than 7 years. So you want to realize that going from Hebron all the way down to perhaps Ramses, it's hard to know exactly where Joseph would be in Egypt, is several hundred miles. So we're talking weeks, maybe a month for them to go all the way down there, and then weeks, month to come all the way back. So surely they would get enough food to last a fair amount of time. Of course, in this time frame, Simeon is sitting in jail. His brothers left him there. He's in jail, and he's just in jail. And they're not even thinking about him until they run out of food. So they're not really terribly concerned. They're not trying to pressure their dad saying, let us take Benjamin down because we need to restore Simeon. It's as if Simeon is just, whatever. And when they run out of food, Jacob says, you need to do something. So we have a fair amount of time going on here. Judah, in verse 3, spoke to him, saying, however, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brothers with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down, for the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you. Then Israel said, I do want you to notice how many times you see Israel now. I don't know if you paid attention in verse 42 when it talked about then the 10 brothers of Joseph went down. In verse 5, that was in verse 3. And in verse 5, the sons of Israel came to buy grain. So God is reminding us, the readers, about the covenant promises. That God changed Jacob's name to Israel because he has this covenant with him. So God is going to fulfill his covenant despite what humanity is doing here. So in verse 6, and Israel said, why did you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you still had another brother? But they said, the man questioned particularly about us and our relatives, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, bring your brother down? Judah said to his father Israel, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame before you forever. For if we do not delay, surely by now we could have returned twice. So again, you want to see this is going on, and it's taking some time, and Judah, it's got too many J's in my names here. Judah is getting frustrated because they've run out of food. He still has family. Everybody else has family. They need food to take care of it, and their dad is not doing anything because he is still hung up on Rachel. So you see that. Because Jacob loved Rachel and hated Leah, that meant he loved those boys. And the other 10 sons, not so much. Doesn't really seem to care for them a whole lot of anything here. And that is still the case all these years later. He is still bent out of shape. And now all he can think about is, I've already lost Joseph. I can't possibly lose Benjamin because that's my last connection to the wife whom I have loved. And so this is the most important thing to him. Not that he's part of a nation, not the covenant promises. This is the most important thing to him, which is what we're going to see, that God is going to change this in Jacob's life, because that needs to go away. In verse 11, then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bags and carry down to the man as a present a little balm and a little honey, aromatic gum and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of the sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and arise and return to the man. And may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man, so that he will release you, your other brother, and Benjamin. I always find it interesting that he doesn't even say Simeon's name, just your other brother. Because again, your other brother is not important. Benjamin is important. Everybody else doesn't amount to a hill of beans. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So the men took this present, and they took double the money in their hand, and Benjamin. Then they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So in verse 16, when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, bring the men into the house and slay an animal, make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon. So the man did as Joseph said and brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. And they said, it is because the money that was returned to our sacks the first time that we are being brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for slaves for our donkeys. Which I always find really fascinating, that again, you have this ultra-wealthy guy that he has nothing better to do than take 10 shepherds as slaves. They're not going to be good slaves because they don't know how to do what the Egyptians need them to do. There's going to be ornery guys here, but this is how people are. Everything happens in this life revolves around me. You know, when something happens, it's because of me. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's because of me. Something happened at the store, well, it's because of me. God's trying to do something to me. We just have a hard time conceiving of the universe revolving around any person other than me. Verse 19, so they came near Joseph's house, steward, and spoke to him at the entrance of the house, and said, "O my Lord, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, and it came about when we came to the lodging place that we opened our sacks, and behold, each man's money was in the mouth of the sack, our money in full. So we have brought it back in our hand. We've also brought down our other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." He said, "Be at ease. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them. Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet and gave them their donkeys' fodder. So they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present which was in their hand and bowed to the ground before him. Then he asked them about their welfare, and he said, "Is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he alive?" They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." They bowed down in homage. As he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said, "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "May God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out and controlled himself and said, "Serve the meal." So they served him by himself and then by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is loathsome to the Egyptians. Now they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, and the men looked at one another in astonishment. He took portions to them from his own table, but Benjamin's portions was 5 times as much as any of theirs, so they feasted and drank freely with him. Why do you suppose Benjamin got 5 times as much portions as everybody else?
Joseph is Jacob's son, and Jacob centered in on Rachel and the 2 boys. He's also centered in on his full brother.
Okay, it is possible that Joseph is putting stuff in front of Benjamin because they're siblings. But I suggest to you a different reason. And it's about have the hearts changed. So now Joseph is going to make sure that Benjamin, the youngest, the one remaining son of Rachel, whom Jacob loved, he is treated above and beyond everybody else of the brothers. And Joseph is going to see how they're going to treat Benjamin, because he saw how they treated him, Joseph, when his father bestowed extra things on him. They grew envious, they mistreated him, and they attempted to kill him, then sold him to slavery. So he wants to see, are they going to do anything different to Benjamin? Have they really changed or not? Did you notice that in verse 30, Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. That Joseph is finding this very difficult to do. He's not having an easy time trying to get to the truth of the matter. Sometimes it really is hard to give forgiveness to somebody, but it is infinitely harder for reconciliation to take place, because you have to try to restore trust. And invariably in the church, when we're trying to be reconciled to somebody, it's the person who is less sinful or is not in the guilty who's trying to restore this reconciliation to this person. So somebody did something to you, and you're trying to restore this relationship, trying to give them means of trust, and they don't want to trust because they've been hurt. They don't want to do these things, and they give you all these reasons not to trust them, not to restore this relationship, not to be reconciled to them. All of you, I think, have been in church long enough to have experienced any number of church fights with members, with husbands and wives, with members. And looking back on it, oftentimes you could see it being something really important, but most times it's not. Rarely have I seen a church split over doctrine. Sometimes it does happen. But more times than not, what happens is that churches split and divide because of personality conflicts, because people are just not getting along. And when you try to work a relationship that way, when you try to broker peace between two groups, when you try to get this reconciliation, it's next to impossible. It's just really challenging to restore trust with somebody here. One of the reasons I think we have chapters 42, 43, and 44 is to see this example of reconciliation in process. And I want you to see that it takes time. When a husband or a wife has an affair and that trust has been broken, if the husband or wife doesn't want a divorce and they want to remain married, it takes time for that reconciliation to take place. It takes time for trust to be restored. It's not something that can be just taken in a matter of days or weeks. It's months/years for it to happen. And we get impatient with that, but that's just the truth of the matter. It takes that long. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we see Paul talking about reconciliation and that the apostles have this ministry of reconciliation. And because Christ has reconciled us to God, we can reconcile to one another here. And in the church, we have the opportunity to practice reconciliation, and it is painful. There is nothing easy about having a conflict with a brother and trying to restore that relationship, trying to establish trust, trying to get it back to where God wants it to. It just hurts, which is why people oftentimes just say, I forgive you, but that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to leave you alone. I'm not going to have this relationship restored. I'm not going to be reconciled to you at all. I'm going to see you over there, and I'm going to be over there. That's not what needs to take place. Joseph needed to be restored to his brothers. His brothers need to be restored to Joseph. And it is hurting. It's hurting the brothers. It's hurting Joseph. It hurts people in the church. One of the reasons God doesn't take all of us up to glory the moment we become Christians, one of the reasons that God leaves us on this earth to suffer and to be terrible sinners is because he needs us to work on our ability to reconcile with one another. And so he gives us a church filled with men and women who are, sorry to tell you this, filled with wrong people, wrong ideas, contrary expectations, who view the world in the wrong way, which is to say different than however you view the world. But God says, I need you to get along with this person. And more than get along, I need you to have this harmony. I need you to have this trust so that you can reach out to this brother here or this sister here and give them everything that you need to give because you can trust them above all other people in this world. God understands that it takes years to have that, which is why he gives us years to practice on it here. So if there's somebody in this congregation that really annoys you, that you just don't like, I would encourage you to try to start that reconciliation now. It is going to be the truth that there are some people that you get along with better than others. But it should be the truth in the church, brothers and sisters, that there is no man or woman here that we can't trust with what is most important to us. And if there's somebody we can't trust, then we need to work on that. We need to see about getting their hearts changed if they're stuck in the wrong spot, which is going to take time. And if their heart has changed, then we need to acknowledge that change, which is why we need to be looking at people and accepting them as they are now. It is hard for us to remember that people change, that the person we are today was not the person we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It is true sometimes we don't change, but more times than not, we really do change. He says in chapter 44, then he commanded the house steward, saying, fill the men's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph had told him. As soon as it was light, the men were sent away, they with their donkeys. They had just gone off out of the city and were not far off when Joseph said to his house steward, up, follow the men. And when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from whom my Lord drinks, in which he indeed uses divination? You have done wrong in doing this. So he overtook them and spoke these words to them. They said to them, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks we have brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we will also be my Lord's slaves. So he said, now let it also be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then they hurried, each man lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and when each man loaded his donkey, they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers, I want you to notice that it says when Judah and his brothers, not Joseph's brothers, not the 10 brothers, not Jacob's sons, but when Judah and his brothers, that's Moses' way of indicating that Judah is going to take the lead here, came to Joseph's house. He was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is this deed that you have done? Do you not know that such a man as I can indeed practice divination? So Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. Then Judah approached him and said, O my Lord, may your servant please speak a word in my Lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh. I want you to notice what Joseph is doing here. He has given the brothers every opportunity to abandon Benjamin. And he's given them a justifiable reason to abandon Benjamin. He took something he shouldn't have taken. He got caught. And so you can just leave him here to get the consequence for his action. Joseph wants to see, have they really changed at all? Will they abandon him or not? In verse 19, my Lord asked his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? We said to the Lord, we have an old father, a little child of his old age. Now his brother is dead, so he alone is left of his mother, and his father loves him. Then he said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. But we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. You said to your servants, however, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. Thus it came about when we went up to your servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord. Our father said, go back, buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons, and one went with me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me, and harm befalls him, you'll bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up with the lad's life, when he sees the lad is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. For your servant became surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, a slave to my lord, and let the lad go with my brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me? For fear that I see the evil that would overtake my father. Now you want to see in Judah that he is doing this intercession. And he is doing this substitution. Substitution. That Jesus Christ himself does. You want to see that Judah is innocent of what was accused of Benjamin, but because he made a promise, he was going to keep the promise, even though it was going to make him a slave, and he wouldn't see his own children. Even though his wife had died, he still had children. He was willing to do all this, even though he was innocent. It's this that Joseph needed to see to show the hearts really had changed. Now, the Israelites needed to see this so they could understand what it meant to be an Israelite. That Judah interceded for somebody else, and he was willing to sacrifice everything for somebody else. God, through Moses, will tell the people in Exodus 19 that I meant for you to be a kingdom of priests, which intercede for people. So that's what he needs to do there. Now, for Christians, we understand that Christ is our intercession. But we should also understand that since we have been reconciled to God through Christ, that we can practice this reconciliation to everybody else, that we can intercede on their behalf, be a substitution, and not get our own way, but get this peace for people. Did you notice in chapter 43, the steward says in verse 23, be at ease, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Did you notice? Let's see here in verse 28 of chapter 42. Then he said to his brothers, my money has been returned, and behold, it is even in my sack. And their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done for us? They were seeing it as something bad, but God really just gave them their money back. He gave them the food. He took care of them because that was his promise. They're seeing what the steward is doing as something bad, but God really was taking care of them. He has given them peace. They don't see that because they're not able to trust God yet, because they haven't been reconciled yet to Joseph. So we'll go ahead and stop there, and we'll get the next week. Any particular questions that you want to ask? Okay, we have 2 weeks. Oh, yes, sir?
So do you know why he kept Simeon? Of all the brothers, why did he keep him?
I think he kept him because he was the next in line. So he didn't keep Reuben because Reuben really did try to intercede for him. However, the Jewish rabbis felt that Simeon was kept solely because he was a more wicked sinner than the other 9 brothers. You know, it's all about giving a reason. We want to have a reason for everything that happens. When things happen randomly, we don't like that. So if Simeon was taken, it's obvious because he was a more wicked sinner than everybody else. We see that in the New Testament. We see that in our own lives when something bad happens to somebody, and that's just not really the case. We don't know why God does things. We know he has a reason, but we should just understand we don't understand his reasons. So we got 2 weeks left. We'll finish up the this story here next week, and then the last week we'll just talk about the promises given through Jacob's blessings. Class dismissed.